Okay, well, we might get started and hopefully a few more people will join us. So, welcome to March's session of our SoTL SIG. Very pleased to introduce our presenter today, Dr. Corinne Green from the University of South Australia. And she's going to be talking to us today about reflecting on reflective practices as SoTL scholars. So, I will hand over to Corinne to get the session started.
Thank you, as I immediately confuse myself by scrolling through my slides too quickly. Namani, Nainari Corinne Borayu, Nadu Tampanti, Nadu Ghana Yata Katikanti. So my name is Corinne. I am joining you from Ghana country in Adelaide and acknowledge that the University of South Australia campuses are on Ghana, Boandik and Bangala country, and that this is country that always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And if you are joining from elsewhere, like Naarm, Melbourne, or wherever you are around these lands now called Australia, please do acknowledge those in the chat and that kind of thing. Background noises. I'm not hearing any, Eileen, but that might be an issue that you're dealing with. So, yes, so this is here, and what this image is of Karawiripari, or the River Torrens in Adelaide. This is area that has been a place of teaching and learning for tens of thousands of years, and of people gathering to talk about teaching and learning. So I find it very special that I get to continue in that tradition here today. So in that vein, now I can't get through my slides at all. There we go. Bit of technological difficulty, always good for a session, right? So I wanted just to start off by encouraging you to take a breath, and I'll take that breath myself too. And from a position of curiosity, I wanted to ask, why are you here? So I'd encourage you to put into the chat any responses that you might have, whether you have reflected on your practice before and so you're like, yeah, I want to keep on doing that, or maybe it's something new and that's why you decided to come to this session. Are you thinking this might be something about publishing reflections? And what are you curious about today? So if anyone wants to add that into the chat of why are you here? What are you hoping to get? Thank you, Diana, for sharing, joining from Bunurong and Boonwurrung country. Greatly reflective, and it's made you the teacher that you are today and you want to learn more. Kay wants to connect with others who are into reflective practice. You've published before through auto, duo, and collaborative ethnographies. Fantastic. Thanks, Kay. Wendy is here because the LD SIG had a similar webinar at the same time, but you're here. So we've got competing sessions. Would have been nice if we could have, collaborated and joined forces there. I'm going to do my little trick of taking a drink of water so that I stop talking and let you have a chance to type. Learning more about SoTL research and what moves beyond a standard reflection. There's a few people in here, it seems like that it's your first SoTL SIG, so welcome. Great to have you here, or as they say in Ghana, mani na pudni. It's good that you're here. You're here with reflective colleagues, so you already were having a time of a regular reflection catch-up, Agnes, and you're saying, actually, rather than us catching up, let's all go to this thing together. Fantastic. Anthony would like to know how to facilitate reflections by other staff because they're reflective, but how can I support others to be reflective? Interesting. Keen to engage with reflective practice to make more time for this regularly. Wonderful. Well, hopefully you'll be able to, see some of those curiosities be explored today. And if not, I am more than happy to continue the conversation afterwards. So that will be great to have. So the inspiration for this session, or the impetus for this session, was that I had shared with this group in a previous SoTL SIG session. I was really exciting news that I had a chapter in a book published last year. And it's actually this book here, the one that's also on the screen. So, holding it up is... Anyway, it's been, the book has been edited by Janice Miller-Young and Nancy Chick. It is open access. It's got chapters filled with it is filled with chapters from SoTL scholars around the world. And thank you, Jen, for adding those links back in. So there is the link for that book chapter there, as well as a couple of others. Gabby, you're doing this with your reading group. That's awesome. So I'm going to be using both what I wrote in this chapter as well as the process that I underwent to write this chapter as a stimulus for the conversation today. And throughout the session, I'll be reading some of the bits that I wrote, and I've got it in italics in my notes, and I'm kind of curious about whether you'll be able to pick up what bits are author reading and what bits are just me talking and just chatting to you. So we'll see how we go. I'll cue this first one so that you can know what it might sound like. So at the start of this chapter, I wrote, when I first saw this book's call for proposals with the editor's declaration, we believe that it's time to map out what it looks like to be a SoTL scholar and how to get there by design. I was immediately excited to read the book. I had recently finished my PhD in teacher education at the University of Wollongong and relocated interstate to start work as an academic developer at the University of South Australia. I had been involved in the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or SoTL, primarily through the International Society for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, or ISOTL, for 5 years through somewhat serendipitous means, taking up invitations to collaborate with colleagues on SoTL projects, as well as attending and presenting at SoTL-focused conferences. I anticipated the value of this book as I started to make increasingly strategic and intentional moves for my career. Happily, the act of writing this chapter has helped me to map out my plans for the future. So this book, or at least this chapter, has indeed lived up to my initial hopes. So as I said, I saw the call for chapters. I thought that's going to be a great book to read, but it's going to be like a while before that's actually a book that I can read. So actually, maybe I have something to share that can go into this book. So I wanted to back up a little bit and think about what do we mean by reflective practice. Clearly, we have a lot of people that are involved in reflective practice in some way in the room. So anyone want to throw into the chat what you think reflective practice means or involves? And instead of elevator music, no, I won't read more because that'll be confusing having me talking while you're writing. So I'll just sing some elevator music in my head. And trust that people are writing. What do you think reflective practice is? Examining your actions critically. Excellent. Thanks, Dayani. It's a deep consideration of your own practice with connections being made with new and developing concepts, theories, and ideas. Fantastic. Thanks, Gabby. Looking at your experiences and impacts and evaluating what works and what could be improved and having others reflect with you so you get a wider view. Great. So we're kind of seeing that sense of it's that deep, it's not just kind of like, I don't know, how did that go? But it's starting to get into that deeper kinds of things of what do others think about this? How have others approached this kind of thing? Identifying and reevaluating what can be improved in my own practice. Great. Critically analysing my experiences, decisions, and actions to enhance learning, professional growth, and decision-making. Thanks, Anthony. And Marina, it's conscientious and somatic thinking about past, present, and future actions in order to learn and make positive changes. Great. What a way to word it. Yes. I've worded it somewhat more simply by saying that it's about stopping to consider why I do what I do, and to be doing that by drawing on my experiences, drawing on the literature, drawing on discipline norms. I see in the chat we've got things like poetic inquiry, to look at things we've heard and read into new connections. That's a cool idea. And exploring frameworks that can give you that critical perspective of your acts and self-construction to become aware of wider social forces. Yeah, thanks, Kay. So it is really about, not just, it is that sort of that deeper, that critical analysis. And again, in the book, I've said that this chapter is a reflective essay of my story thus far as I'm becoming a SoTL scholar. I take up the invitation from Mick Healy, Kelly Matthews, and Alison Cook-Sather to share the messy, unfinished personal work of living and to critically analyse learning and teaching as I experience that work. I have delved into academic literature and critical reflection of my experiences and have endeavoured to express what I've learned along the way so that others can go on a similar quest. So this can be done in informal ways like journaling. I would often be making notes for future course iterations of things that had worked or things that I might need to develop a bit more. But also in more formal ways, like having a reflective essay published in a book or other publications. I've recently put in and been accepted with my Advanced HE Senior Fellowship application. Comes up in annual performance review conversations and an Adelaide Fringe performance, which I'll tell you more about in a moment. But Agnes, thank you for saying that it's a learned skill. Yeah, it's something that you can develop and an ongoing process of active curiosity. That's really cool. So I'd rather not spend this whole session talking at you, so I'm going to let past me talk at you instead. I decided that that was going to be a better way to do it. So in writing this book chapter, I was also invited to give an interview for a podcast. So I wanted to play a little bit about that interview. It's another one of those links that Jenny had shared, and sort of from past me to tell you what I think about reflection. So hopefully I've shared this properly so that you can hear it. If not, let me know.
That for me, reflection has been such a key aspect of my involvement in SoTL, my development as an academic. It's how I take the time to stop and notice some of the patterns and the gaps and to really try to notice what hasn't been noticed. And I think that's a key part of SoTL too, of that you are wanting to be curious about your teaching, about what could be explored in that area, and yeah, to really notice what isn't noticed and consider why that might not be noticed.
So that's past me having some thoughts, and I'm going to choose not to add to past me's thoughts. But as I mentioned earlier this year, I performed at the Adelaide Fringe. Actually, I did it last year and this year. So it was part of a science comedy performance show where different scientists would give a 10-minute set about their research and their work. And so mine focused on how the educators that I work with, as being an academic developer, how those educators that I work with remind me of bushwalking tracks. And I wanted to play one of the key messages that's relevant for today. Unfortunately, it's a part where no one really laughs, but I promise it was a funny comedy set. And if you watch the whole thing, then you'll see that, maybe.
To think is such an important skill, whether you're teaching or bushwalking. It's about stopping to appreciate the view and understanding how you got there and what you might do differently next time. This kind of reflective practice means not just doing what's always been done because that's what's always been done. You might end up teaching in the same way or walking the same bushwalking paths, but you'll do so with a deeper appreciation for why you're doing it that way and what that might mean for future explorations. Also,
so yes, again, some more ideas, kind of that there was a book chapter by John Warner that I really like, where he talks about the teaching folklore of like doing things the way that it's always been done because that's how it's always been done, and we just kind of perpetuate this idea. And reflective practice is that opportunity to put a stop to that and go, why am I actually doing things this way? And what are the other options? How else could I be exploring in these things? So hopefully I have either convinced you to engage in reflective practice, or because a lot of you were already doing reflective practice, you're just going, yeah, I agree. Fingers crossed that that's the general attitude of the group. But if you want to take your reflections out of your personal journal and your individual setting, how can you go about doing that? I thought that I would tell you about the process that I went through for this particular book chapter as an example of what it might involve. So for me, it started with some of those informal reflections. That was something that was an ongoing standard part of my practice, and things that I would be regularly documenting. So that had kind of always been a piece. And then received the call for chapters for this particular book. That was in December of 2021 from Janice and Nancy. So that was when I started to think, actually, maybe I could do something more formal with these informal reflections that I have. So I went looking for a framework to scaffold those formal reflections, and I'll talk a little bit more about that particular framework in a moment that I had followed. And then it's important to consider ethics, collaborators, that kind of thing. I know that recently I have been a part of a session within my uni about ethics, and the bottom line was just apply for ethics. As much as ethics is frustrating, apply for it, because then you get the external confirmation of no, you don't need it, or yes, you're covered, or those kinds of things, rather than you trying to make that decision as the researcher. And in fact, I've been currently working on a collaborative autoethnography project that is needing ethics approval. And so going through that process to make that happen. And then it was submitting the chapter proposal. So this chunk of the timeline was from December of 2021 through to about February of 2022. So looking at about 3 months there in terms of what was involved there. And there's obviously more to the timeline, but I wanted to pause and tell you a bit more about the framework that I used. So when I was thinking about this chapter, you know, the title of the book went through a few different iterations, but at one point it was being and becoming teaching and learning scholars or SoTL scholars. And so I was looking for a framework that would help me to do the stopping and thinking in a more formal way. And in searching for being and becoming, I stumbled across Anna Stetsenko's transformative activist stance. And Anna posits there is no gap between changing one's world, knowing it, and being or becoming oneself. All three dimensions simultaneously emerge from this process. So, oh, excellent, Wendy. I love that you're crocheting in the middle of this. Makes me want to go into my bag and get out my latest project and show you, but I digress. So this plat is something that Anna Stetsenko didn't have in her piece, but when I'm reading through her discussion of this framework, that's what I was seeing. I was seeing it as the plat where these three dimensions were threads that were plaited together. It continuously lengthens over time. They're intertwined. So when I was writing this chapter and thinking about how I could articulate what my journey into SoTL had been like, I could tease apart the plat a little bit and focus on a thread in turn, helping me to consider how the developments in that area had led me to where I am now and where I could go from here. So importantly, the braid metaphor communicates how these elements, learning and knowing, changing and transforming, being and becoming, are entwined parts of a whole. I can't truly examine them in isolation, and each informs the other as time passes and the braid lengthens. So I wanted to give you a little bit of insight into the threads because I thought that it might help you to understand what I mean and to see that a little bit clearer, but I won't give it all away because you can go and read more about it in the book chapter. So learning and knowing SoTL. Learning about SoTL has made my approach to teaching and learning much more intentional, while conversing with others and articulating my knowledge and intentions has deepened my understanding of SoTL. Changing and transforming my identity, engaging with SoTL and collaborating with others to explore teaching and learning has stretched me in many ways. Taking on a leader attitude as a SoTL advocate and enabler is one way that I can contribute to others' transformation. And in terms of being and becoming a SoTL scholar, as I reflect on my career thus far, I realise that SoTL has been the through line for everything that I do. Whether I've noticed it or not, it's been there all along, from my undergraduate degree through to now. Having explored the threads of my learning, transforming and becoming in turn, I can see how they are intertwined. Learning what SoTL is has deepened and shifted my identity as an educator and a researcher. Applying a SoTL lens to my work has transformed my practices and given rise to informal leadership opportunities. By joining SoTL projects, reading and contributing to SoTL research, and interacting with SoTL networks, I've been simultaneously and increasingly learning and knowing SoTL, changing and transforming my identity, and being and becoming a SoTL scholar. And perhaps more pertinently for this particular session, the process of writing this book chapter and of reflecting on my own lived experience as a SoTL scholar has been, as Healy and colleagues note, inextricably linked to the ongoing processes of developing identities, clarifying my values, and learning through writing. By examining each thread and noticing the braid they are creating, and in determining how I can communicate this with others, I've been able to see more clearly both the process and the product of my adventures in this space. So that was the framework that I used. If it resonates with you, consider using it yourself. If it doesn't, find some framework that works for you to, to structure your reflections, because that is quite important if you are looking to publish this. That it, again, as we talked about earlier, it's that critical analysis. It's not just, here's my thoughts, you should care what I have to say, but it's actually, drawing and structuring them in ways that enable you to go deeper. And I certainly went deeper when I went into each of these plats. I sort of had some ideas of the things that I wanted to talk about in this chapter, but it was by tying it into this framework that I found other aspects that I could talk about or other ways that they were connected. So having that framework is really useful. So back onto the timeline then. So after I had submitted the chapter proposal and they said, yes, looks good, let's go ahead with it, I then spent some time in writing it. So that was drawing on my own reflections from documents that I had at the time, like emails, drawing on literature, and sort of delving back into what was this like a year or two ago when I was going through that bit, and how is it different now? And I had the first draft of that submitted back to the editors in July of 2022. And then yes, Gabby. No, didn't mean to raise your hand. Classic thing in a classroom of like, is that a raised hand or is that you scratching your head or something? No, totally fine. So after writing the chapter, it then went through peer review process. So the editors organised it where we had feedback from other chapter authors and from the editors as well. The editors in this instance had some specific requests to include literature from SoTL in the South and from other, various aspects that they kind of gave to everyone across the whole book, and other ways that they wanted to tie the different stories together across the whole book. So there was a bit of back and forth with that. And then there's the copy editing processes, which is a bit of hurry up and wait, because it's like, when this comes to you, you will have 7 days to get it back to us, but we can't exactly tell you when it'll come to you, but just be ready for that. So hurry up and wait. And in the meantime, I was then also talking about the ideas with others, which has led to a few other things like the Fringe show, like the podcast episode. It's embedded me in the HERDSA SoTL SIG further, and by reflecting on my practices, I understood my practices better, which enabled me to talk about those ideas with others as well. And then also, once the book finally came out, hooray, which was in middle of last year, was then celebrating that and promoting that with other people and things like that. So this process here was about 2 years, and plus the bit from before. So the initial call was December 2021, and then the book was published in middle of 2024. So you might or might not do all of those same steps that I did. And of course, it's nowhere near as neat and linear as the graphic suggests when you're living through it. But I would really encourage you to read the other chapters in the book, both in terms of the content about becoming a SoTL scholar, but also for the format. So the editors have tagged the different chapters by genre, among other categories that they've tagged them by. So there are a bunch of other reflective essays in there that you can look at. So if you are thinking about publishing a reflective essay, it might help to read those and sort of see which of those approaches matches with how you might go about writing it, that kind of thing. As some other examples. So the thrust of the argument in the chapter is this idea that I've termed planned serendipity. There have undoubtedly been a lot of serendipity in my SoTL quest. Would I have made my way into SoTL without those formative opportunities? Perhaps. After all, there are many paths I probably could have taken. Nevertheless, I'm exceptionally grateful for the path that I have been able to take and the relationships that have grown along the way. In acknowledging these moments of serendipity, I recognise the privilege that I have had that has enabled me to take advantage of these opportunities. I've also demonstrated agency by taking the initiative and seizing opportunities that presented themselves, as well as considering where those opportunities arise and thoughtfully being present in those spaces. I see this approach as a kind of planned serendipity, where I intentionally enter spaces and create capacity so that I can take up the as yet unknown opportunities that I may have in the future. Developing and sustaining key relationships has given me further access to these spaces and opportunities. And this is where this cycle has come into play and the strategic choices that I look to pursue and that you might consider for your own SoTL careers. Sometimes you'll just have to say yes to everything that comes along because you need a job that puts money in your bank account. That's totally reasonable. Sometimes you'll need to say no to everything that comes along because there's only so many hours in the day and only so many things that your brain can handle at once, and that is also totally reasonable. But if you're at a point where you want to be strategic in your SoTL choices and in your career, then you might want to start to think about this idea of planned serendipity. So reflect on what you've been doing, what your goals are, and how you want to get there, and then consider where those opportunities might arise and be thoughtfully present in those spaces. And when those opportunities arise, pursue them. You want to balance it a bit with, if I'm saying yes to this, then what am I saying no to? Because we can't actually say yes to everything. But if it aligns with your goals and you have the capacity to do it, then go for it. For me, this has included being involved in this SoTL SIG and sharing my excitement about the book being published. And some of you said, oh, you should post that onto our LinkedIn group, which I did. And Sue said you could lead one of the seminars to talk about that, which I did. So that's how we're here today. And there's actually been another opportunity within my university to do a similar kind of thing. So this is kind of the second time that I've presented this session. But again, it's about kind of talking about what you're interested in and, building those relationships and being present where those opportunities arise. And then the opportunity arises and you take advantage of it. So that's kind of the planned and the serendipitous coming together. I like to make plans, but hold them loosely, having goals and objectives, setting deadlines, and moving with purpose and direction, while maintaining the flexibility to adapt and overcome as challenges and opportunities arise. I will therefore make and remake the plans for the SoTL career that I want to build. But of course, this chapter was written a while ago. So it was about 3 years ago since the first draft, and it represents a point in time. And there's another point from the podcast episode where I was talking about that. So I wanted to, nope, not that slide. Wanted to play that now.
I'll say too that in writing this chapter, it was really useful to help me to think through these ideas and how could I decide it for myself, let alone communicate it to a different audience. But that chapter was written maybe a year ago initially, the first draft, and it's gone through some revisions and all of that kind of thing, and hopefully it'll be published soon, and I'm really excited for it to be out there. But I have this strong sense that this is me at a moment in time, and that hopefully I do continue to learn and know about SoTL and change and transform through SoTL and be and become a SoTL scholar.
So as you can see, even that podcast episode is a point in time because the book wasn't published at that point. But, it's about doing these things continually and over time and having these kinds of reflections are that opportunity to go, this is a point in time, and then how have I grown since then? So speaking of how have I grown since then, I thought it might be useful to kind of show some of the developments in terms of my reflective practice and where this work has taken me. So between writing the first draft and the book chapter being published, I have settled into this academic development role. When I was writing it, it was very new to me and I was sort of figuring out what that might look like. And now I'm much more settled in it and really see myself as being a critical friend to prompt educators to be intentional in their approach to teaching and learning and to articulate what they're doing and why, and to be able to do that myself as well. Obviously been interviewed for that SoTL on the Sofa podcast, sharing some of the ideas and some of the backstory of this book chapter, and also performed at the Adelaide Fringe, which required reflecting on what's interesting about my role and about what I do and what is worth talking about. Since the book chapter was published, I've talked with colleagues about my experience in SoTL and with reflective practice and with writing this book chapter, just like we're doing today. And I've also been awarded that senior fellow status with Advanced HE. And I spent a good chunk of that application focusing on my reflective practices and how they've influenced others. And I know that there were a few things in the chat going about supporting Mel in particular, but also others looking at potentially putting forth an application for that. And I am more than willing to share that, whether you're going for senior fellowship or you're just interested in how it was that I talked about reflective practice in that, more than happy to chat about that as well. And then going forward, I'm also considering what my role might be. So as you may be aware, UniSA and Uni of Adelaide are creating a new university called Adelaide University, opening next year. And it's all kinds of fun and games to make that happen. But it's also, I've been considering what my role might be in Adelaide University, not just the course development work that I'm supporting now and into the near future, but also what's important to me long term. I've been doing this informally and personally, as well as I mentioned, more systematically with this collaborative autoethnography project about supporting educators in times of change. So I want to read the final pieces of this chapter, and then I have some questions for you as well as open for questions from you. So in writing this book chapter, I've given myself a valuable opportunity to reflect on my own story, engage with literature on identity and SoTL, and clarify my intentions for my ongoing work as a SoTL scholar. Writing this book chapter has been an opportunity for the kind of introspection that, as Pull and Chick writes, leads us to ask, who am I? Not as an existential crisis, but as an exploration of relevant parts of our identities. Who am I? I am a SoTL scholar, learning and knowing, changing and transforming, being and becoming. So wanted to throw it open now open for any questions from you, but also encouraging you to think about these questions for you. We talked a little bit at the start about what you were curious about and perhaps what you were expecting to get from this session. Have those expectations been met? If you're wanting to connect with other people that are reflective practitioners, maybe this will now be the point where your expectations can be met. Also thinking about what serendipitous or planned moments have led you to join this particular session, especially for those that are saying it's your first SoTL SIG. So clearly there was something more than just, oh, I go to that every month that made you decide to join this particular session. And also to think about how you might pursue more formal reflective opportunities if that is what you are interested in. So open the floor.
I can put up my hand for real this time.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. I loved listening to you share your journey there. And just in terms of the serendipity, it's funny. I must have signed up for this ages ago because I kind of forgot. And then I saw it on my calendar and I was 5 minutes late and I thought, let me join anyway. And you had that book out. And I have a reading group with some colleagues and we're about to start that. So it was just immediately that point of connection. And we're also working on a collaborative autoethnography project. So I'd love to talk to you more about that. So yeah, it's just I love these moments where everything kind of seems to click, and I guess it's also the nature of people who come to things like this and spaces like this. But yeah, lovely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabby. Yeah, and I think that is part of the planned element of it. Like, I want to be talking with people about teaching and learning and talking with people that are interested in that. And so I go where those people are, and this is one of those spaces where those people are. And so, yeah.
Sure. But you don't always, often people are working on other things, right? And different methodologies. Oh, yeah. So it's, those moments where it really comes together. Thanks, Corinne.
Yeah. Thanks, Gabby. I see in the chat that Kay's asking for a bit more about the collaborative autoethnography project. Yes. So we're in the early phases, but essentially what it is that I think it was the HERDSA, the 5 C's of SoTL seminar that was on last year, put on by the larger HERDSA group, and met through that Emma Price. And we got chatting afterwards of like, hey, what's that you're interested in? This seems really interesting, because we were both in, well, so I shared some of the work that I had been doing about a literature synthesis of when is the right time to use workshops and when should we be using other forms of professional development. And so Emma wanted to chat about that in terms of at her institution, things had been changing and there was an opportunity to apply that. Then simultaneously, I had gone to the SoTL conference last year and met up with or connected with Erin Vey, and Erin has been, was really keen for us to continue our conversations beyond the conference. And so I kind of started a collaborative autoethnography with both of them, and then about a month ago realized that they're getting closer and closer, and maybe I should just not be the middle person and we should all 3 of us chat. So the 3 of us are now getting together and reflecting on, so Erin's based in America, which is obviously going through all sorts of change in terms of higher education, let alone everything else. I've got major institutional change of a new institution being grown, and Emma has institutional change of restructuring and redeveloping and that kind of thing. So we're looking at how in each of our different roles as academic developers and as peer educators and the different roles that we hold, how we can be supporting educators through that time of change and in their professional development. So that's sort of where we're at. We're sort of at the very early stages of it, but looking to get published and things like that later on. So keep an eye out. And if you're in this space, I'll probably tell you more about it as we go as well.
Thank you for that. That sounds really, really interesting. Sorry to flood the chat a little bit with some of the work that I've done, but I thought they might just be good examples. And I did a collaborative autoethnography on doing a Pomodoro technique with 7 other people, and we did one like that. And then also an article on the actual ethics of doing a duoethnography, so a sort of bit of a critical thing about that. So if you're thinking about ethics, whether you go get it or whether we kind of suggested an agreement, sort of a structured thing to go through to keep people safe during duoethnographies, and kind of as a living document in situated ethics is also, it was quite an interesting thing too. So, but yeah, love the reflective practice, and really keen to see how AI is starting to affect our identities and our workspaces and things like that. So yeah, just I've got all of these in my calendar for the rest of the year. So tell me more.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. Yeah, I think that question around the ethics is a really interesting one. So I didn't do any ethics for this book chapter, and it was me talking about myself and some slightly veiled comments about other people, but all very positive. But if you are working with others, or there was a bit that I had read, Chang et al. Was a great resource when thinking about collaborative autoethnography. And they're talking about, it's not just can you answer the ethics questions, but it's also about the relational ethics and what's my responsibility if my reflection is going to be talking about person X, Y, and Z that have not opted into being a part of this research, but I'm talking about what my reflections were on what they did and things like that. So I think it's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, we covered that. We called them incidental participants kind of thing, and talked about how to make composite characters or things like that to keep people's identities out of it. So yeah, it's a fascinating space.
Yes, indeed. Yes, I can share that Chang reference. Let me stop sharing if we're done with those reflection questions, and I'll drop that into the chat for you, Gabby. And I think I've caught up on the chat, but sing out if anyone else has thoughts or comments. I hope that's because you're all just stunned, or you need that moment to reflect yourself, or Anthony.
Yeah, thanks. Probably a bit of a thought-provoking question, really. So I guess in my role as Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching, it's about supporting my staff in reflective practice. And staff have done it extremely well with unit evaluations, improving and so forth. But what we're starting to see now is, higher education becoming complex, fast-paced, that reflective practice is becoming sort of more routine and a superficial exercise, I guess, now. How do you think reflective practice can evolve to become more meaningful, especially in the fast-paced world of higher education at the moment?
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, reflective practice comes fairly easily to me, so it's probably not necessarily so useful for people that aren't as keen on it as I am. It's sort of the curse of the expert type of thing. But I think that, to me, it is the sort of thing that it's like stopping to sharpen the saw. So if anyone isn't familiar, and I'm going to butcher this because I can barely remember it, but it's something probably Abraham Lincoln or something, sort of saying, if you give me 4 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 3 hours sharpening the saw. And the idea of like, yes, it will take longer for us to stop and think about what we're doing here. And it feels like that is a cost that is too high to bear. But if we do that, then we set ourselves up better for going forward, which can be difficult to convince people of. I think for me, that's part of why I really loved getting into SoTL, because it means that doing the reading of the literature and understanding how others have done teaching in higher ed kind of thing, that counts as valuable, because I'm, using that as my stopping to sharpen the saw time of, that kind of piece. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it a lot with the, and I might need to be careful how I word this, but with Adelaide University pieces, because it's such a big project to be developing thousands of courses to be taught within the new university, we have a very short cycle of developing courses that I am supporting. And they run one after the other. In fact, they run overlapping. And so you're just constantly on to the next cycle and on to the next cycle. And it means that there are several times where I've been like, I just wish, my wish for Santa was that he would bring me a magic wand so that I could just pause it and we could do some of these things more intentionally and figure out how we wanted to do them and then continue on with it. But instead, we're doing a lot of the like, oh yeah, something needs to change, but already we've started the next one and, chasing our tails a little bit. And so it's kind of like in that process, I am seeing what happens when you don't have those chances to stop and think and to sharpen the saw. So I don't know if any of that rambling helps you, Anthony, but.
No, fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, as Stephanie, you're saying, it's the matter of time. And absolutely, like we are, like, there would be it wouldn't be a higher education discussion if we didn't talk about how we're time poor and we don't have the time for this stuff. And, like right now, today is my writing day. I'm currently in a writing retreat that I've stepped out of to be able to do this. But I have gone, 20% of my workload as a teaching academic is research and scholarship. So I will be setting aside a day for that. And, in this instance, there's other colleagues that also do it. So we all get together, which is great. But, finding those patterns that help for you to prioritize the things that are important but not urgent, so that you can be stopping to do this stuff. And, sometimes the reflective practice is just a quick note to yourself as soon as the class finishes that you then put in more dedicated time later to come back to and reflect on deeper and connect to literature and things like that. But yeah, which is exactly what Marina's saying, as you can see. Can start with 5-minute sessions, scaffolding and developing practice. Do a free writing session. Like at one point, I'd sort of gotten out of this habit, but there was a period of time where when I came into the office, before I actually came into my office, I would sit under a tree outside and I would write for 3 pages worth and just kind of free writing a bit. It generally was kind of getting stuff out of my head and, not necessarily reflective practice so much, but find those ways to build in those habits for yourself that because it's the kind of thing that doesn't take too long if you start it small, but it can be big. So, kind of, you don't have to be like, oh, I can't climb that mountain of reflective practice. Just start with these little bits. Like my tattoo here, it says solvitur ambulando, which means it's solved by walking. Like we don't have to have the whole thing figured out yet. We can just start taking a few steps and getting a bit more reflective as we go. So.
There's a new journal starting out called Learning Letters, and
Yes.
they're taking 2,500 word articles, and that would be really good for a short reflective piece or something like that if people are new to publishing in this space. But I'm happy to support people who want to publish in this kind of thing. Happy to share my application that I did for the HEA SF thing. So I just, really interested in this. So if you feel, I'm around if you just, I don't know how that people get my email. I guess you just off one of those things I sent. My email will be on there. Yeah, happy. This is great. This has been a really cool session. Thank you so much. And I do comedy too.
Great. Yeah, so Jenny's just put in the Learning Letters link, and I'd be remiss if I didn't also spruik the journal that I'm an associate editor for, which is Teaching and Learning Inquiry, which is the journal connected to iSoTL. So would be very happy to have reflective pieces in that as well. But again, you know, if you're looking at publishing a reflective piece, it is important to have that framework and to be that critical analysis and not just, here's what I thought. But
can I talk? I wonder, I think the thing with reflection, firstly, the big thing is like time, like everybody else. But aside from that, it sometimes feels very like, okay, I'm sitting, I've got my pen, what am I writing? I
yes.
wonder whether it might be fun to like create almost a collaborative list of potential reflective writing prompts for educators in higher education and SoTL. So like just what are the things that we're thinking about, or what could prompt our thinking? And if we could share that, then when we sit down to do this reflection in the online reflection session that might one day happen or whatever, like then at least you can go, oh, what should I think about today? And then go and like kind of pull one out. And that could be fun,
Yeah.
or like, or read, share other people's reflections and pull issues out of that we can reflect on our own. And that could, creating that sort of collaborative connection could be stimulating and inspiring as well. That's an idea.
Yeah. So actually, when Emma and I were starting to talk about collaborative autoethnography, and we're talking about having some reflective prompts for ourselves, which we will be using kind of. So the way we're operating it is we'll reflect ourselves and write some bits ourselves and then meet up together and share our bits and reflect on our combined things and then go away and come back and go away and come back kind of thing. And so Emma actually just put into Gen AI this prompt. You are an expert in collaborative autoethnography. Can you suggest some writing prompts for myself and a colleague who are using this research methodology to explore the development and organisation of academic professional development in times of transition? Because that was particularly what we were focusing on. But, I think as with anything with Gen AI, there were some useful things, some unhelpful things, but it was a good kind of starting point of like, how can I focus my attention here today? And we're kind of like, it spat out, I think, 10 different prompts that we could use. And we're going to tweak some of them, and we're going to kind of use one of those before each time that we meet up. So absolutely, Gabby, I think that that's a great idea. And if it does work, that it's something like that we could collaboratively collect, then that could be useful. But it could also be something that, and Wendy's saying, using it for daily drawing and creating as educators. Certainly in our project, we're planning on not only having written reflections, but also artistic pieces of photographs or of, paintings that we do or things like that. And, I think having some reflective prompts to help to focus your attention can be really useful. Or if you want to go really simple with it, a simple reflection that I've had is, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And that kind of, the simplicity of that prompt means that it can be applied in a lot of different situations.
Sorry, everyone, just to jump in. I just put into the chat, there is a guiding question framework from Kelly Massey's book on writing about teaching and learning. So she will be actually with us in May, talking a little bit more about different writing styles. And this is just one of the things that she will mention. So if you're keen to learn more about that, please join us in the May session, and we will expand in different ways of writing about teaching and learning. But just posting that into the chat so you have a copy of the framework to use that as guided question for reflections.
Yeah, I love that book. It's so useful anytime that I'm talking with people about what SoTL is, or especially if it's people that are discipline-based that haven't had a lot of experience in writing about reflective practices or about their teaching and learning. I always direct them to that book to kind of get a sense of how to write in SoTL spaces. And that was what I drew on for this book when there was the quote that I read earlier about the acknowledging the messy lived experience. That was from that book. So. I see that Marina's got another one as well that is kind of the different approaches and modes that you can use, which is fantastic too. Thank you. Hard to tell if people are rapidly typing away or if we're sitting back.
No, totally engaged.
Oh, I believe it. I believe that you're totally engaged. I just don't know if I need to fill the space or just wait for something to pop up in the chat. Gabby, it sounds like your book club is just going through all of the great ones.
Well, it's just so funny because we've done one book and we're starting the next one, and it's the two books that have come. But our book club's actually been an amazing space. We're education-focused academics with varying experience of being academics. Some people come from industry, medicine, and varying levels of experience with SoTL. So we started this book club reading that book, a chapter a week, and then we do a written reflection around it, and we engage with each other's reflections and reflect on those, and we meet periodically, and that's our collaborative autoethnography project come out of that. So it's been like a really transformative experience for all of us as well. I think the reflection is important, but I'm really passionate about community and finding people to build. I'm just very relational in general, but going on the journey with people, I find it helps you define who you are in relation to other people as well, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
We should finish our next book in a year or so. If anyone's got any recommendations, check it our way.
Yeah.
I have a question. There's a group that I'm part of. I didn't start it, but it's the peer observation, reflecting on people's teaching. The only people who volunteered to do it were the people who are already super confident with their teaching. And it's like, how I know we could use like appreciative inquiry and be gentle, but what is the nature of that fear or that thing of people who don't want to engage in things like that, and yet our institutions value quality teaching? I don't know if has anyone done a study on why people shy away from it, or is there a question like, what are you afraid is true about your teaching? I don't know, just any suggestions. I'd love to know how I can kind of encourage others to reflect on their teaching.
Yeah, I think peer observation is definitely a very vulnerable space to be in. So I've added into the chat the literature synthesis that I did about professional development formats. And one of the pages in there is about peer reviews of teaching, and particularly looking at how they can be used as a development kind of activity and a mechanism for enhancing teaching quality, but also they're used as a measure to indicate the quality of teaching and to kind of assess that, and used for promotion. And I know that we certainly do that at UniSA. And when those two purposes get conflated, it makes it really high stakes and really nerve-wracking for people to engage with it, and that sense of vulnerability of it, because it is, they feel like, well, if I let someone into my room, even if they're telling me that it's there to help me to learn and to develop in this way, maybe it will get back to my superiors and it will affect me going forward and things like that. So it's not necessarily an answer, but there are some resources and some references in that page that might help you, Kay, to explore it a bit deeper. And some of them do talk about some of the contexts that help to support doing it in a positive way.
Yeah, we do have this system of the notes that are made go to the person who is observed, and it's confidential to them.
Yeah.
So even so people don't and yeah. So
I think my PhD research was in teacher education and looking at school university partnerships and how they can be used to develop school teachers. And in particular, for one of the schools that I went to, they had such a strong culture of going and observing each other and learning from one another as teachers, that for them it was a bit of a no-brainer to incorporate the pre-service teachers into those conversations and to, you know, have them coming and observing them as well. And I think that however it is that you can, again, wave that magic wand and develop a culture where observing one another and learning from one another is just part of what you do. Of course, I will come and see your teaching, and of course, I want to invite you into my classroom. You know, that would be a way of doing that. But yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, we might wrap it up there. So just a final reminder, there won't be a meeting in April just because it's very awkward with the sort of Easter break, Anzac Day, public holiday situation. But we will be back in May, as Jen already said. We'll be joined by Kelly Matthews, who'll be talking about how to write about sort of education, teaching and learning SoTL, continuing that conversation from that fabulous book that she was involved with. So we look forward to seeing you then. So thanks very much, and thank you again to Corinne for joining us today and having such a great conversation with us.
Yeah. And my final plug in the last 2 seconds, I've put in an abstract for iSoTL conference as a poster for this, and I'm envisioning having like yarn that is plaited and like post-it notes and all kinds of interactive things. So if you're coming to iSoTL in Christchurch this year, you may, as long as it's accepted, you may be able to contribute to my poster about the braided threads.
Oh, happy to. I'm aiming for that conference as well.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you again in a future session.
Bye. Thank you.